Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry. And just before we get started in today's episode, I wanted to let you know about my friends at the Mediocre Movie Club who sponsor this podcast. Go check them out. You can find them on Facebook at the Mediocre Movie Club. You can find them on X at Mediocre Movie CL. You can find them on Threads. You can even find them on Instagram, the Mediocre Movie Club. And always you can find their reviews on their website at mediocremovie.club. The website again is mediocremovie.club. Understand that the MMC is a self-professed group of idiots who give above average, always looking for that middle ground, that satisfactory shot there on movies, on music, documentaries, TV shows, all the type of things that you enjoy. The MMC has reviewed in some way. You are more than welcome and encouraged to join in on their conversations. Again, at their website, mediocremovie.club, and always join in and find them on the social media outlets that I mentioned before. I'm grateful to the MMC and glad that they are part of this podcast. Now, today's episode deals with the love of Kim Paxton, deals with somebody, the Teflon Ken, all the names that could possibly be discussed when we talk about Kim Paxton. And understand that I've written about this man, our Texas's Attorney General, for some time. I mean, for the last maybe three and a half years of writing and discussing Ken Paxton's continual legal problems. And we always have to give some sort of context as to how all these things got started. And we have to do that even here. So let's just be clear about a couple of things about this. I have no feelings about Kim Paxton. I'm not a hater of the Attorney General. I don't love the Attorney General. He's not paying me to keep quiet. But that said, he's just somebody who has thrusted himself into media attention, into academic attention, and we just have to examine him. If he didn't do these things, we wouldn't be discussing him. I just want that to be said. Okay, so it's not like I went out of my way to just pick on little old Ken. That's not the case at all. He's pretty much given himself these particular problems, and I'm I'm one of them. I'm not the only one. Media has decided to do its due diligence and report on it. And I don't know if I was the first one. I don't know if I was the only one. I don't know. But I was one person about three and a half years ago who started to really call for maybe investigating the Attorney General. And that was in 2021. That due to the job description that he has and all his legal issues at the time, I felt that there needed to be at least an inquiry into all the things that he did. I mean, let alone the fact wanting to sue other states for the 2020 election, which again is weird, and the fact that he just to read a piece that I have here that he um, that his office requested about $43 million to cover outside legal services in the suit that he had against Google, and also stemming from an opioid settlement with manufacturer Mallinckrodt. So while he asked for the legislature for this particular money, he allocated tens of millions of dollars to raise salaries without the without the legislative approval. And what the House and the Senate really did to him was just kind of wag the finger. It was a bipartisan admonishment of his handling of the Attorney General's office and bypassing the legislative appropriation process that Paxton later did admit that he wished he did that one differently. But all he really faced was a wag of the finger, and perhaps that's all Paxton thought he really should face. And why did the legislature fail the people to really investigate any further into this? Well, We don't really know. No one really talks about that, but we only can truly speculate. We fast forward to 2022, um, to where we get into the whistleblowers issue here. And so Paxton and these whistleblowers in the Attorney General's office that concerned the abuse of power, where they reached a settlement where Paxton would pay these whistleblowers a total of $3.3 million. And that's where the whole impeachment really started. Now, if we need a refresher on this whole issue here, um, as to what happened with all this, it had to do with the fact that these whistleblowers said they came forward and said, we can't work with Kim Paxton because he's incredibly obsessed with Nate Paul. Nate Paul is a developer, was a developer in the Austin area. And what happened was there was seemed to be lots of dots were made here, and they can easily be connected between Nate Paul's deals and the actions from the Attorney General's office. And a lot of the whistleblowers wondered what the problem was, and it really came down to the fact that, well, he had a mistress, he being Ken Paxton. So, in an attempt to try to keep them all quiet, because Nate Paul introduced them, there was a connection there between the mistress and Nate Paul, and he knew about this, and especially there was a connection there with the mistress and Kim Paxton. So that's what the request for the $3.3 million from the legislature to pay these whistleblowers sparked this entire investigation. All right. And, Kate Whitman, who was a spokesman for House Speaker Dade Phelan, told the Austin American Statesman that this process was initiated because he asked for the money, because Paxton asked for this money. The legislature, without providing sufficient information or evidence in support of this, he asked for the money. He couldn't really say why, so he didn't. And had he not requested this, Paxton would not have faced the impeachment that he faced. I mean, that's pretty plain and simple. That's pretty cut and dry. It's cause and effect here. Post hoc ergo propter hoc is not exactly true, but it is in this case. And what's interesting about it is it wasn't the fact that it was Democrats impeaching a Republican attorney general. This was Republicans doing their own bidding, and you had, I want to say, 121 grand total vote to impeach Paxton, and it was incredibly bipartisan here. Completely bipartisan. It was the first time in over 100 years a member of the executive branch was impeached. Last time a member of the executive branch that was impeached was James Paul Ferguson in 1917. So what's interesting about this is you had Paxton, who argued that the impeachment was illegal, that all this was problematic, and the process. John Smithy up in the Panhandle said, this is just indefensible. So yada 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 yada. I mean, let's just face the fact here. All of that defense was hyperbole. I mean, that's really what it was. And as passionate and as those analogies may be, the truth of the matter is that Paxton behaved in a brazenly corrupt manner. How is that even defensible? How can you say that he didn't? And so it was intense grand jury investigations, which are secret, and you had 60 Republicans join 61 Democrats to bring charges against Kim Paxton. And it was one of the most brave things that the House really did in the last session. And kudos to them for it. But this, while it seemed like the evidence was pretty much overwhelming, when it got to the Senate, the whole thing changed. Everything just went off the rails because of one particular issue. And that issue had to do with the fact that this was not a fair trial. All right. I wrote about this as well. Right, it was a piece in the Avalanche Journal. It might have been picked up in other places called "The Heist." I wrote it here in the Outsider newsletter, and all of that basically suggested that this was not even close to being a fair trial. I mean, with the lieutenant governor being the presiding officer and him getting a $3 million donation from pro-Paxton people, you knew right from the very beginning this was not going to be fair. Let's also note the fact that he was supposed to testify, he being Paxton, and then he was supposed to sit through it all. That was never enforced. The 20 charges brought against him, the 20 articles of him, the articles of impeachment that was brought against him, only a handful were thrown out because, well, we don't really need to deal with that. I mean, it's just mind-boggling here. This is crazy. And they just, big deal. Well, then we get into a new problem with Kim Paxton. And this new problem had to do with the fact that he had this the whistleblower's case that he just basically said, I don't want to take part in this anymore. And the Attorney General's office said that he'll stop fighting the whistleblower lawsuit by 4 of the former top executives that he fired in 2020 after accusing the Attorney General of corruption. And he basically said, I'm not really going to do this anymore. I'm not going to fight whatever judgment is brought out. And you might say, well, that sounds like a really good idea. That's good that he did that. Well, yeah, okay, that's fine. But was it for the merits that he wanted to end this thing? Was it for him to publicly want to stop it, to stop distracting the Attorney General's office, to waste the Attorney General's time and effort? Well, we wish that would be the case. Truth of the matter of all this is the fact that Paxton felt that this was an opportunity for him to no longer have to testify under oath. When he was ordered that he had to do that, even after he said, I'm not going to fight anything, the judge still said, you're going to testify under oath. He appealed that order, not once, twice. And it landed him in the near ultra-conservative Texas Supreme Court, which is the state's highest court, that it officially rejected that particular request. And then whenever they came to a date that he was going to do it, he appealed it again. And despite all of this sort of thing, well, scratch that last part. But while he appealed it again, the Texas Supreme Court said, you know what, let's stop his particular deposition this time. So they pumped the brakes on it. And what is ever so true about all of this is that while the Attorney General, in his own capacity, has said that this is all but political persecution, that the courts have it in against me, that all of these things they're just wanting me to look bad, so on and so forth. Well, I guess. I mean, Kim Paxton, if Kim Paxton feels that he looks bad in all this and that this is political persecution, you did it to yourself, dude. You gave your political opponents all of this ammo. They didn't have to drum up something from 30 years ago in a Google search or hire a private investigator to dig up dirt on you when you were in college or whatever else. No one forced anybody to give this up. You did all this. No one forced you to have an affair. No one forced you to have a good relationship, a very close and tight-knit relationship with Nate Paul. No one forced you to asked, to fire four of the top attorney people inside your office. No one forced you to do any of that. So this whole thing about how this is political persecution, the fact that you think that this is okay, that's the problem. That's the problem. This is no big deal. Uh, yes, it is. Okay. So he wants to continually fight this whistleblower lawsuit. He claims to be innocent, but I'm sorry. I have to go back here. I said that he wants to fight it. I meant that he does not want to fight this anymore. He doesn't want to fight this. He just wants to get it over with. And his defenders were all like, "Yeah, that's okay. That's perfectly fine." Sometimes you just have to move on with it. But they missed the point. He doesn't want to testify under oath. And the question about that is why? Why does he not want to do that? Because he doesn't want the truth to come out about his relationship with Nate Paul, the true nature of it. He doesn't want to perjure himself because he's going to lie. And so, yeah. And even like, Drew Springer, who is the state senator, and he's no longer going to run for re-election out of Munster. He took to social media and to state his change of heart because during the impeachment process and during the impeachment trial, he said that, well, there's no evidence here. He was one of these people who was unconvinced of the whole thing, unconvinced of it all, had a high and mighty attitude about it, agreed that it was some sort of political persecution. But then he changed his mind because the AG said, I'm not going to fight any of this stuff. I'm pretty much done with it. And it implies guilt. Give Springer credit here. He actually realized that this is problematic and that's an impeachable offense. And that is something that is guilty, that he's guilty of this. I give him credit for thinking about that and coming back to gravity on this issue. But I just I don't know. I just get frustrated with the fact that everyone thinks that Ken Paxton is this good old boy, this good old guy who's just in a tight spot, and that well, there was no evidence. Are you kidding me? Whatever. But I also, I just had to think about, well, while, Springer wants to bring up the impeachment charges again, it has to go through the process again, to be honest. But the AG's courtroom surrender caused a more pressing issue for those in the public square, mainly because of those who defend him. And that was my entire argument about the whole thing with the Paxton problem, was that his defenders are the ones who have to carry this guy's water. And while, the Texas Tribune and a few other outlets have said, hey, this guy's gotten more popular. And he just seems like he can just deflect anything. And that led to me to write a fairly lengthy piece called The New Ken Deal. I'm sorry, the New Ken Deal. The New Ken doll called Teflon Ken. Not Beach Ken, Ryan Gosling. Not Lawyer Ken. Not Professor Ken, but Teflon Ken. Okay? Because nothing gets this guy down. Nothing can defeat this dude. Even when everything is stacked against him, he finds a way out. He finds a way out. And take his securities fraud issue here. He made a plea deal with prosecutors. Prosecution came to him. I just want that to be clear. The prosecution came to his defense and said, "How about this? Let's dismiss the 9-year-old criminal charges. You do some community service. You pay about $270,000 in restitution, and you take a 15 hours of legal education courses, 100 hours of community service, by the way, and you do all this, and you keep your nose clean for 18 months, and then we'll just drop the charges all together. Paxton was to face trial on April 15th on 3 felony counts, including 2 charges of securities fraud. If Paxton completes the terms of these arrangements, they won't appear on his record. That was directly quoted from Texas media. And I make a joke about all this and saying, look, you want me to believe the fact that he's got to pay some money, pick up some trash on the side of the road, and take a legal ethics class? And then, he just, does all this stuff, doesn't do anything wrong within 18 months, and all this stuff will just go away. That's it. And then I'm very snarky in the fact that when we look at the Pledge of Allegiance, justice for all. No, there's no justice here. This isn't justice. But professionals in this sort of field say this sort of thing's actually pretty common, and they like to cite the Kim Kardashian issue that she made with the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. That when she promoted cryptocurrency, she didn't tell anybody that she was getting paid for it, and she just had to pay a fine. Christine Hurd out of SMU and James Spindler out of UT Austin, they both have said, this isn't really, if you have high hopes of these people going to jail for this sort of thing, your hopes are hollow. It just doesn't usually happen this way. And look, I totally understand that, and I get that. And just a side note here, if you need to look at Kim Paxton's entirety of the security frauds issue, you can just do a Google search and you can find that very clear. But my problem with all this is the fact that last time I checked, Kim Kardashian is not an elected official. And by any reasonable standard, elected officials are held to a higher standard. And they have a higher responsibility to behave as someone who will not be reckless with the laws or that they make or they enforce. And when we think about the overreaching reason for the AG's impeachment, that's what this was. And I've given a lot of credit to the House of both parties for doing this, because it was courageous. And I'm still of the mind it was the right thing to do. But, not everyone agrees with that, and that's fine. But Paxton views this agreement as a tremendous victory, and quite honestly, it is, because he doesn't have to plead guilty. All right. But this whole thing about higher responsibility, being held to a higher standard, Paxton and his legal team felt that this was a whole different thing. They had a whole different take on it. They felt the impeachment and this securities fraud issue was persecution. Nothing to do with justice. His defense lawyer says that I don't think any of this would have happened but for the fact that he was the attorney general at the time they investigated. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And that's not true, because this instance came to light when he was barely into his first year into office. And these charges go all the way back when he was a state lawmaker. So no, that's not a true statement. But, that don't let the facts get in the way of a story. But this matters little, because those who defend Paxton will always echo that. They will always say these types of things. Right-wing media who may not be in love with Paxton, but they love the fact that he holds the seat, that it's an R that holds the seat, not of somebody with integrity. And I'm not saying all Democrats have integrity, because they don't. But I am saying to you that they care about who, and the letter of the name of the person who holds the seat is more important than that person actually having integrity. But that's what the defenders will say here. This was all political persecution. They just looked up for something against good old Ken. Oh, why we got to pick on Ken? And I just have to, this has to be brought up. If Paxton wrote his epitaph, it would include some sort of dig at all the people who came after him. It would give a thumb to the eye to all of them, to say that he withstood the kind of political persecution that no one should ever endure, and no one stronger willed could ever bear it. I could just see it on his gravestone. Problem with that narrative is, somewhere lost in all that is the truth. And we can't really call Ken Paxton anymore. I think we got to call him Teflon Ken, because he won another round, and justice keeps missing when it comes to Paxton. Even though the prosecutor, Brian Weiss, who worked really hard on this, he says that justice was not denied. The agreement that we reached was not reached lightly. When we find out that through really good reporting from Texas media reporters, that they didn't really that the prosecutors probably didn't have much to really go on, and they probably wouldn't have won the case. So instead of embarrassingly losing the case in front of a jury, they come up with this. It's like, I'm a diehard Red Sox fan. It's baseball season. It's great. But in I want to say it was 2019, the Red Sox traded away Mookie Betts to the LA Dodgers. And it was the idea that, Betts, who is a once in a generation star, he's a tremendous talent, he was going to win a lot of money. And the Red Sox didn't really have a lot of interest in paying that. So they thought, let's just trade him instead. Well, we know how well these trades have worked out. That's one of the worst trades in Red Sox history, in baseball history. And that sort of mindset is exactly what happened here. We're not going to be able to really win this case. One prosecutor, one of the legal team left. One of the prosecutors left. And Brian Weiss was trying to find another partner to help him out. And it just, all of the parts of a cookie were crumbling. And they had nothing else to do. I'm not thrilled with this, as you can tell. No one believes the fact that this is justice. No one believes that. But it just compounds the narrative that Teflon Ken is like the Joker. When the chips are down and prosecutors have him in the crosshairs, they have him up against the wall. He's against the ropes. You just need one more decent punch to the jaw to knock him out. Teflon Ken finds a trapdoor to escape. We saw it in the impeachment trial. We saw it when the Texas Supreme Court halted his scheduled sworn testimony that was brought forth by the whistleblowers. And this particular time, we saw it when the charges were dropped and they gave him a slap on the wrist punishment. And he never has to plead guilty. There is no way that justice was denied here. I'm sorry, there's no way that justice was not denied. This was wholeheartedly denied in all this. You tell me there's one justice system that fits for all, justice for all? No. I'll raise your claim by showing you Teflon Ken Paxton, who always finds a back door to flee when justice knocks on the front door. And if you don't get that reference, just Google Ken Paxton runs away when being served. All right. That's this week's free post. That's the podcast for this time. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you subscribing. If you would really like to support the show, please consider becoming a free subscriber. Share The Outsider with as many people as you would like. If you really want to go forward and become a paid subscriber, $5 a month is where you start. Just $5 a month is where you start. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you again next time.